Hey guys, so I'm here to do chapter 3, 6 phone calls. I'm on the 5th phone call now. It's Beverly. It's called Beverly Takes a Whuppin'. Yeah, so if you remember in the movie, she gets pretty jacked up by her boyfriend Tom. And in this chapter, after her phone call, it's not much different. So Beverly lives in Chicago with her husband, Tom. In the movie, she's not married to him, but in the book, she has been married to him for the past few years, and he's really like a cocky ass. And she's it kind of opens up with the phone call. She's talking on the phone and it wakes him up. He goes downstairs to get something to drink. There's no celebration over a big deal like in the movie. They're woken up in the middle of the night by Mike's phone call, and she's talking to Mike, and he goes downstairs to go find more beer, but he realizes he drunk them all. During a baseball game, he drank 3 6-packs. So, I mean, he's a real winner, this Tom guy, and he does work for her. He is president of her company or whatever. But he's like gotten fat, and he drinks a lot of beer, and obviously he mistreats her. So he's a loser. And basically, it kind of talks about their backstory. So they met at a bar where she was an assistant designer at a company, and he worked for a clothing line also. So it's just somewhere that was frequented by their type of business. And he saw her coming a mile away. It even says like he's dreamt his whole life about finding a Beverly Marsh. You know, he interprets it as like he was a lion and she was the antelope, and he just kind of like spotted her from the other side of the bar. He knew exactly what she was. He knew she was weak, and he knew he could probably control her, and he knew she was very talented, and so he used that to his benefit, obviously, and he pounced, and it was like his dream come true. You would think if it was his dream, he would treat her right, but that's not the case. He was always kind of contradicting and mean, but in one of the chapters, in one of the chapters, he's kind of like tripping out because, I mean, not one of the chapters, one of the parts in the storyline, he is pretty upset because he doesn't have any more beer. He considers the hard liquor, but he's already got kind of a hangover. So he goes upstairs and he just listens in on her conversation rather than just walking in on the phone call. He decides to eavesdrop. But he's enraged, not by the phone call, and not that she's talking about Mike Hanlon or Bill Denbrawl. He hears guys' names, but he's not enraged by that. He's enraged because he hears like the flicker of a lighter, like she's lit a cigarette, and this like pisses him off. Like he's sitting there and he's built up all these rages, and he's going through all these emotions because she's not allowed to smoke a cigarette unless he has her permission. And this is kind of a little bit on like the first time and stuff. It says like, supposedly she had thrown them all out, but she had held out on him. The proof was clamped between her teeth right now. And because she still had not noticed him standing in the doorway, he allowed himself the pleasure of remembering the 2 nights which had assured him of his complete control over her. So he's standing in the doorway. He's watching her. She doesn't notice him because she's packing and she's talking to Mike on the phone, and she's not really paying attention. She's now in the process of getting ready to go to dairy. And he's having this flashback because he's upset about the cigarette between her mouth. I don't want you to smoke around me anymore, he told her as they headed from the party in Lake Forest. I have to choke that shit down at parties and at the office, but I don't have to choke it down when I'm with you. You know what it's like? I'm going to tell you the truth. It's unpleasant, but it's the truth. It's like having to eat someone else's snot. So he's irritated at the fact that she smokes around him. He thought this would bring some faint spark of protest, but she had only looked at him in her shy, wanting to please way. Her voice had been low and meek and obedient. All right, Tom. Pitch it then, he said. So she pitched it. Tom had been in a good humor for the rest of that night. A few weeks later, coming out of the movie, she unthinkably lit a cigarette in the lobby and puffed it as they walked across the parking lot to the car. It had been a bitter November night, the wind chopping like a maniac at any exposed square inch of flesh it could find. Tom remembered he had been able to smell the lake, as you sometimes could on cold nights, a flat smell that was both fishy and somehow empty. He let her smoke the cigarette. He even opened the door for her when they got to the car. He got behind the wheel, closed his own door, and then said, "Bev?" She took the cigarette out of her mouth, turned toward him, inquiring, and he unloaded on her a pretty good, his hard, open hand striking across her cheek, hard enough to make his palm tingle, hard enough to rock her head back against the headrest. Her eyes widened with surprise and pain, and something else as well. Her own hand flew to her cheek to investigate the warmth and tingling numbness there. She cried out, "Ow, Tom!" So this is the first time he hits her as they're courting. They're not married yet. They're barely in a relationship. And he hits her over the cigarette because he had told her before he didn't want her smoking in front of him, and that if she did smoke, it was only with his permission. So she only looked at him with her wounded brim hazel eyes and said, "Why did you do that?" She tried to say something else, but she burst into tears instead. "Throw it out." "Wait, what, Tom?" "The cigarette. Throw it out." Realization dawning, and with it, guilt. "I just forgot," she cried. "That's all." So, I mean, he's a pretty big dick, and it says that, basically he got a hard-on by it. Like, he felt power, and he felt, afterwards she was just kind of sheepish, and they had sex that night, and it just goes to show, like, his control over her, and he's able to beat her and still get her to make love to him, and yeah, he's a dick. I mean, hitting someone is never okay, guys. That's not ever a legit thing. There's like zero excuses. I mean, the only excuse is if you don't listen, because if you don't listen, you're kind of asking for it, right? Just kidding. It's not okay. Hitting anybody is not okay. Unless you're a girl hitting a guy, because they're so much bigger and stronger than us. Just kidding. Not cool. Do not hit anybody. Not a girl, boy, wife, husband, child, grandparent, parents. Just keep your hands to yourself. Words hurt more. So anyways, so he's in the room, he's in the doorway, he's watching her pack, and the thoughts of the guys do pass through his mind now, and he sees what she's packing. She's now hung up with Mike, and she's packing like tattered underwear and like sports type bras and not so great sweaters and like holy nightgowns. So he knows that she's not going to cheat on him. He knows that this is something different, but he doesn't really care. All he thinks of in his mind, I mean, these little things are passing through, but all he keeps thinking about and all he keeps fixating about is the damn lighter and the cigarette. So he finally jumps in and he confronts her, and she starts making excuses as to why she has to go to dairy. She still doesn't really realize the cigarette until he's so pissed off. She just tosses it though. Like, he's kind of a little bit unnerved for a second because he's only seen her in a determined phase like 3 times, I think he says, when she's dealing business, when she's doing this and that. So she's pretty determined against him. She's not in her regular sheepish personality at this time. She's trying to explain to him why she has to go to dairy, and she's trying to explain to him about little Georgie and how everything came flooding back, and he just doesn't give a shit. So it says here, Tom had listened to enough craziness from within and from without. He moved on her fast, cocking his right arm back over his shoulder like a man about to throw a javelin. And Tom had this belt that he had made for Bevy. He had taken off the belt buckle and turned it into a loop so that he can grasp it better while he's swinging it at her. The belt hissed the path through the air. Beverly saw it coming and tried to duck away, but her right shoulder struck the bathroom doorway, and there was a meaty whap as the belt struck her left forearm, leaving a red welt. "Gonna whoop you," Tom repeated. His voice was sane, even regretful, but his teeth showed in a white and frozen smile. He wanted to see that look in her eyes, That look of fear and terror and shame. That look that said, yes, you're right, I deserved it. That look that said, yes, you're right, all right, I feel your presence. Then love could come back, and that was right and good, because he did love her. They could even have a discussion, if she wanted to, of exactly who had called and what this was all about. But that must come later, for now school was in session. The old one, too. First the whoopin', then the fucking. A real winner, right? He swung the belt sidearm and saw it look around her hip. There was a satisfying snap as it finished on her buttocks. Tom, stop it, she said, and her very tone infuriated him. She sounded like a playground monitor talking down to a tantrumy 6-year-old. I have to go. This is no joke. People are dead, and I made a promise a long time ago. So even as she's getting whipped, she still is dedicated to the idea of getting the hell out of there because she has to go to Derry. Tom heard little of this. He bellowed and ran at her with his head down, the belt swinging blindly. He hit her with it, driving her away from the doorway and along the bedroom wall. He cocked his arm back, hit her, cocked his arm back, and hit her, cocked his arm back, and hit her. Later that morning, he would not be able to raise the arm above eye level until he had swallowed 3 codeine tablets. But for now, he was aware of nothing but the fact that she was defying him. She had not only been smoking, she had tried to grab the belt away from him. And oh, folks, oh, friends and neighbors, she had asked for it. And he would testify before the throne of God Almighty that she was going to get it. He drove her along the wall, swinging the belt, raining blows on her. Her hands were up to protect her face, but he had a clear shot at the rest of her. The belt made thick bullet cracks in the quiet room, but she did not scream as she sometimes did, and she did not beg him to stop as she usually did. Worst of all, she did not cry, as she always did. The only sounds were the belt and their breathing, his heavily and hoarse, hers quick and light. She broke for the bed and the vanity table on her side of it. Her shoulders were red from the belt's blows. Her hair streamed free. He lumbered after her, slower, but big, very big. He had played squash until he had popped an Achilles tendon 2 years ago, and since then his weight had gotten out of hand a little bit, or maybe a lot would have been a better way to put it. But the muscle was still there, firm cordage sheathed in the fat. Still, he was a little alarmed at how out of breath she was. She reached the vanity, and he thought she would crouch there, or maybe try to crawl under it. Instead, she groped, turned, and suddenly the air was full of flying missiles. She was throwing cosmetics at him. A bottle of Chantilly struck him squarely between the nipples, and he fell to his feet. He was suddenly enveloped in the gagging scent of flowers. So, in the midst of their argument after he hit her a few times with the belt, she had tried to grab the belt away from him, which made him go into this fury of nonstop belt slashings. And now that she's been able to kind of crawl away over to the vanity, she's starting to throw stuff at him, and she's trying to fight back, and she does end up hitting him just like in the movie. She chucks that last one and pounds him right in the head where he starts bleeding. In the movie, she didn't take a beating like this. You know, she's getting whipped with this belt. I think he had went to get the belt, and then she started throwing stuff in the movie. But in the book, she's taken quite a lashing. She's getting pretty jacked up. So, at one point, he gets so upset at her, he just races towards the vanity, and he just pounds her into the vanity and breaks it, and they both fall to the floor. And they're both kind of pretty beat up at this time. So it says, Tom heaved the vanity off to one side. Then she backed up, sliding her hand into the loop. Bev went ahead and crawled for the belt. She shook her hair out of her eyes and watched to see what he would do. Tom got up. Some of the mirror glass had cut one of his cheeks. A diagonal cut traced a line as fine as thread across his brow. He squinted at her as he rose slowly to his feet, and she saw drops of blood on his boxer shorts. You give me that belt, he said. Instead, she took 2 turns of it around her hand and looked at him defiantly. Quit it, right now, Bev. If you come for me, I'm going to strap the shit out of you. The words were coming out of her mouth, but she couldn't believe it was her saying them. And just who was this caveman in the bloody undershorts anyways? Her husband? Her father? The lover she had taken in college who had broken her nose one night, apparently on a whim? Oh, God help me, she thought. God help me now. And still her mouth went on. I can do it, too. You're fat and you're slow. I'm going, and I think maybe I'll stay gone. I think maybe it's over. She realized almost too late that the question had been a distraction. He was coming for her before the last word was out of her mouth. She whirred the belt through the air at an arc, and the sound it made when it smashed across his mouth was the sound of a stubborn cork coming out of a bottle. He squealed and clapped his hands to his mouth, his eyes huge, hurt, and shocked. Blood began to pour between his fingers and over the backs of his hands. "You broke my mouth, you bitch!" he screamed. "Oh, God, you broke my mouth!" So, yay, Bev. He came at her again, hand reaching, his mouth a wet red smear. His lips appeared to have burst in 2 places. The crown had been knocked from one of its front teeth. As she watched, he spit it to one side. Part of her was backing away from the scene of the sick moaning. She wanted to shut her eyes, but that other Bev felt the exhilaration of a death row convict freed in a freak earthquake. That Beverly liked all of this just fine. I wish you'd swallowed it, that one thought. I wish you'd choke on it. It was the latter Beverly who swung the belt for the last time. The belt he had used on her buttocks, her legs, her breast. The belt he had used on her times without number over the last 4 years. How many strokes you get depended on how badly you screwed up. Tom comes home and dinner is cold, 2 with the belt. Bev's working late at the studio and forgets to call home, 3 with the belt. Oh, hey, look at this. Beverly got another parking ticket, 1 with the belt. Across the breast. He was good. He rarely bruised. It didn't even hurt that much, except for the humiliation. That hurt. And what hurt worse was knowing the part of her craved that hurt. She craved that humiliation. Last time pays for all, she thought, and she swung. She brought the belt in low, brought it in sidearm, and it whacked across his balls with a brisk yet heavy sound, the sound of a woman striking a rug with a carpet beater. That was all it took. All the fight promptly went out of Tom Rogan. So, Beverly finds her inner strength. Beverly picks up the belt that had been dropped when Tom chased her and knocked her into the vanity table. And she beat the shit out of him, basically, with the belt that he used and made for her. And she got her revenge. She grabs all her belongings and she takes off running, and Tom is screaming after her, "You get back here, you bitch. You come back here. Now, you're going to pay for this in the morning." And he's just screaming at her. She told him, what, like in the movie, you ever come near me again, I'll kill you. And she runs downstairs. As she's leaving the house for the last time, she can hear him screaming, and she feels a sudden sense of freedom as she walks out the door. And that's when she starts to cry. And she gets to the bottom of her driveway and collapses on a post when she realizes that she left her purse in the house and her ID and all of her money. And she goes from crying to just laughing. So she's she goes into this mad kind of laughter where the neighbor even turns on a light because she's just going nuts. And finally she just gets up and walks away. And she doesn't go back into the house. So that's the story of Beverly. I mean, hers is a lot more traumatic than the rest of them. The rest of them seem to be living pretty kosher lives, and she's got this dick of a husband who beats the shit out of her. And you know that from the movie, but I think when you read it and you see that it's a constant in her life and every little thing she does, there's a consequence, I think that makes it kind of more sad. And I think for Beverly, the phone call was actually like a savings grace, because even if she does die, I don't think she really cares at this time. She's not as frightened as the rest of them were. Each one of them got a phone call, and Stan committed suicide, and Eddie freaked out and had an anxiety attack, and Richie couldn't stop barfing. Ben went to get drunk, and Beverly fights her ass off to get free to go to Derry. So she's obviously the more broken one, and she's obviously, in this case, the more stronger one. So kudos to Beverly. All right, guys. So that was part 5 of chapter 3. The last phone call is coming up. It's to Bill, Stuttering Bill Denbrawl, Georgie's big brother. And I'll get that one posted soon. All right. Bye.